Hi everybody, welcome to Live Blogger. I have combined all the videos in our Scroll Spy Indicator tutorial series into this single long video so that it's easy for you to follow. Now in this video we are basically going to create this design right here, and we have these different sections over here, and on the right side we have these dots, and if you hover over this we can see that the section names are displayed over here, and if I click on any of these dots we are taken to that section. And we also have the dot active over here with the red background color, and we can click on any other dots and we'll be taken to that section. And even if you scroll up or down, the dots are activated. And this is also responsive, so if I decrease the width of the browser window, this is how the mobile version will look. So here we have this arrow, and if I click on that, we have the dots displayed over here. And here also we can click on any of these dots and go to that section. So this is what we're going to create in this video. And in the end, I will also show you how to add this design to your Blogger website. And I will also leave the link of the source code in the description of this video. So let's get started. Right here, I have created this folder called Scroll Indicator, and I just opened it with VS Code. Now let's create the necessary files. So let's click on New File. And let's create an HTML file. I'll just name it index.html. And let's also create a CSS file. I'll just name it style.css. And let's start with the index.html file. So in VS Code, you have the shortcut where you can just press exclamation and press tab, and you will have this basic HTML5 code. Right, let's link our CSS file over here. So I'll just tap link and press tab. And in the href, I'll just tap style.css. Right, now let's start with the markup of our design. Now the first thing I will do is I'll just create all these sections. So let's create a section, and in that I'll just have a division with the class of wrapper, and in that I'll just add the text. So this is about us, and let's copy this and paste it 3 more times. And for the second one we have services, so let's type services. And then we have downloads, and then lastly we have testimonials. Now in your website you can go ahead and add any content you want inside these sections. Right, now let's create these dots. So for that, let's create a division with the class of Scroll Indicator. Now in this division, let's create anchor tags for all these dots, because these are basically links. So let's create an anchor tag, and now here for the href attribute we need to add the ID of the section. So let's add IDs to these sections. Now for the first section, let's add an ID of about, and here for this href we can just type hash about. And now if we click on this anchor tag, we'll be taken to this about section. Now in the same way, let's go ahead and add IDs for all the other sections. So let's type ID, and for this we'll just type services. And then we have this section, let's type ID, let's type downloads. And then lastly we have testimonials, so let's type ID, testimonials. And here let's create anchor tags for all these sections. So let's duplicate this, and here for the second one let's type services. And then for the third one let's type downloads. And for the fourth one let's type testimonials. Now there are some more things we need to do in the HTML, but before that let's start styling this. So let's go to a style.css file, and first of all let's open this in our browser and let's see how it looks. So I have this extension called Live Server installed in VS Code. So once you install that, you can just right click over here in the HTML and click on Open with Live Server. And now here we can see that our content is displayed in the browser. So let's go back and let's go to our style.css file. And the first thing we will do is we'll just remove the margin from the body. So let's type body, and let's type margin 0. Now we can see we don't have any margin for the content. And the next thing we will do is style the sections. So here we can see we have all these section tags. So let's type section, and for each of the sections let's add a height of, let's try 70 viewport height, and let's also add a background color, and let's set it to F1 FAEE. And if we go back to the original design, we can see that for one section we have a different background color, and for the other section we have a different one. So we have alternate colors over here. So let's go back and let's type section colon nth of type, and here I'll just type even, And for event sections, let's add a background color of white. And now we can see we have different colors for different sections. Right now let's go back, and here we'll just add a font size, and we'll just set the font size to 40 pixels, and we'll set the font family to Roboto and sans serif, and we'll also set the font weight to bold, and let's also change the color of the text to dark gray. Right now let's add a max width for the wrapper. So here we can see inside the section we have this division in the class of wrapper. So let's type section wrapper, and let's set a max width of 700 pixels, and let's also add a padding of, let's try 32 pixels, and let's also bring this to the center. So if I add a background color over here, we can see it is on the left side. So let's type margin 0 and auto to bring it to the center, and let's remove this background color. Right now let's start designing these dots. So if you go back to our HTML file, here we can see we have this division with the class of scroll indicator. So let's target that. Here I'll just tap scroll indicator, and in that we have anchor tags. So let's add some content to the anchor tag so that we can see it. So I'll just add some text over here. And now if we go back, here we can see we have the anchor tags displayed over here. Now we want to bring it to this right side. So let's go back, and let's target the scroll indicator. So let's tap scroll indicator, and let's set the position to fixed, and let's set the right position to, let's try 100 pixels, and we'll set the top position to 50%. So it will be 50% from the top, and it will start from the 50% mark. So here we can see it starts from the 50% mark. So for that you also have to type transform translate y and set it to negative 50%. And now we can see it is exactly in the center. Now we need to bring all these anchor tags one below the other. So let's set the display to flex and flex direction to column. And we'll also add a gap of 40 pixels. Right now let's add some padding to these anchor tags so that we can click it whenever we are a little near to the anchor tags. So here for the anchor tags, let's add a padding of, let's try 10 pixels. And now we can see when we are 10 pixels near the anchor tag, we can click on that. Right now we don't want to have this text over here for the anchor tags. We need to have these dots. So for that we're going to use after selector. So let's go back and let's go to the HTML file, and let's remove all these text from here, and let's go back to our style.css file, and let's access the after selector. So let's tap scroll indicator a : after, and here we need to add a content property, and here if I just type ASDF, and if you go back, here we can see that ASDF is displayed over here. So we can add extra content to our elements using after selector. So what we're going to do is we're going to position these after selectors relative to the anchor tags. So here for the anchor tags, let's tap position and let's set it to relative. And here for the content, let's set it to position absolute. Now we don't want to have any content, so let's remove this content from here, and we just need to have a dot. So let's set the width of the dot to 10 pixels and the height to 10 pixels. And we'll also set the border radius to 50% so that we have round shape. And we will add a background color of black. And now if you go back, here we can see we have these dots displayed. Now if you go back to our HTML, and if I add some content over here, we can see that the dot is not exactly in the center. So for that we have to type top of 50% and left of 50%. And we also have to type translate to 50% for the x and the y axis. Now it will be exactly in the center. So here we can see we have the dot exactly in the center of the anchor tag. Now let's go back and remove this content. Right now the next thing we need to do is we need to add an active class for one of these dots. So here we can see by default we have the first one active. So let's go back to our HTML, and for the first anchor tag, let's add a class of active. And let's go to our CSS file and let's add some styles. So here we need to type scroll indicator a.active : after, And here we need to change the color of this dot to red. So let's tap background and let's set it to red. And we also need to scale it up a little bit. So let's tap transform, scale, and let's set it to 1.3. Now if you go back, here we can see that we have a larger scale and red background color for this active dot. But we can see that the position of the dot has changed. That's because here we can see we have added a translate of 50% to the X and the Y axis. And here in the active class, we are adding a scale of 1.3 for the transform. So this value gets reset. So I'll just copy this from here and I'll just paste it over here. So we have the translate and also the scale. Now if you go back, now we can see that we have the correct position for the dot. Now if we click on any of these dots, we are taken to that section. But we need to have a smooth scroll for that. So for that, let's go back and here let's add a property to the HTML and let's type scroll behavior and let's set it to smooth. And now if we go back and if I click on any of these dots, we can see we have smooth scrolling. Right now the last thing we need to do is we need to display the section names over here when we hover over these dots. So if you go back to the original design and if you hover over this, we can see that the section names are displayed over here. And we also have a little bit of animation. Now for that we're going to use the before selector. So let's go back and here we can see we have already used the after selector. So let's type scroll indicator a : before, and here we need to add the content, and for the content we need to add the section name. So for now I'll just type about, and here we can see about is displayed. Now let's style it. So first of all, let's set the position to absolute, and let's set the right position to 24 pixels, and let's set the top position to 50% and transform translate Y, and let's set it to -50% so that it is exactly in the center. And now here we can see it is exactly in the center. Right now let's add a background color, and let's set the color to red, and let's set the color of the text to white, and we'll set the font family to Roboto, and let's set the font weight to bold, and we will set a padding. So let's set the padding to 2 pixels top and bottom and 16 pixels left and right, and let's set the text transform to uppercase, and let's set the font size to 13 pixels, and let's set the pointer events to none so that we are not able to click on these section names. So let's tap pointer events and let's set it to none. And now let's add a box shadow. So let's type box shadow and let's set the values to 0, 7 pixels, 14 pixels, -6 pixels, RGBA 0, 0, 0 and 0.8. Right now the next thing we need to do is we need to display these section names only when we hover over these dots. So by default let's set the opacity to 0, and we'll also bring it from the right side a little bit. So here for the transform I'll just change this to translate, and here for the x-axis I'll just type 4 pixels and -50% for the y-axis. And let's also add a smooth transition, so I'll just type transition and let's set it to all 400 milliseconds ease. Right now let's write the code for the hover effect. So I'll just type scroll indicator a : hover : before, and here we'll just set the opacity back to 1, and I'll just type transform translate and let's set it to 0 for the x-axis and -50% for the y-axis. Right now if we go back to our design, we can see that the section names are not displayed by default, and if we hover over these dots we have the section names displayed. Now the last thing we will do is we will add the correct section names for all these dots. So let's go back, and for that if we change this to something else, it will have the same name for all the dots. So for that we're going to use data attributes in HTML. So let's go back to our index.html file, and for each of the anchor tags we will add a data attribute. So let's type data hyphen, and here you can add any name after the hyphen. So here I'll just add a name section, and let's set it equal to what we want to be displayed over here. So I'll just type about, and let's add the data attributes for all the other anchor tags. So let's type data hyphen section equals services, and here let's type data hyphen section equals downloads, and then lastly we have data hyphen section equals testimonials. And now we need to access these data attributes in our CSS. So let's go to our style.css file, and here instead of adding the name directly, let's type attr for the attribute, and here we need to add the attribute name. So let's type data hyphen section. And now if you go back to our design, and if you hover over the first dot, we have about displayed, and for the second dot we have services displayed, and for the third dot we have downloads displayed, and then we have testimonials. So everything is working all right, and if I click on any of these dots, we are taken to that section. So that's basically how you can create scroll spy indicator using HTML and CSS. Right, here is our source code, and the first thing we need to do is create a JavaScript file. So let's create a file called main.js, and let's link it in our HTML file. So here I'll just type script :src and press tab, and here I'll just type main.js, and here we'll also add an attribute called differ, so that the JavaScript is loaded after the whole content of the page is loaded. Now we're going to use something called the intersection observer in JavaScript to detect which of these sections are inside the viewport. The viewport is basically the area where the content of the website is shown in the browser. So this right here is the viewport, and we need to detect which of these sections enter the viewport and which of these sections are outside the viewport. So for that, as I said earlier, we're going to use intersection observer. So let's go to our main.js file, and let's create a constant called observer. You can name this anything you want, and you have to set it equal to a new intersection observer. So let's type intersection observer. Now for the intersection observer, you need to have two arguments. The first one is a function. So let's create a function called add active class, because we need to add the active class which we have in the style.css file. So here we can see we have this active class, and when we have the active class, we are adding the background color red to the dot. So for adding the active class, we're going to create this add active class function, and the next argument is the options that we need to have for the intersection observer, and for that we need to have an object. So we'll create an object called options. You can name this anything you want. Right now let's create this function and this options object. So first of all, let's create an empty object. We'll add the options later. So let's type options equals, and we'll create an empty object. And now let's create the add active class function. So let's type const add active class. Now for this function, we need to have two arguments. The first one is the number of entries, which is an array. So let's type entries. You can name this anything you want. And the next one is the observer, which we created over here. So let's pass that over here, observer. Now entries is basically an array which represents all the items that we are observing. So before continuing with this function, let's first of all observe the elements that we need. So if you go back to our HTML file, here we can see we have these sections, and we need to observe these sections, and we need to see which of these sections are inside the viewport. So let's go to our main.js file, and let's select all the sections. So here I'll just type const sections equals document.querySelector all, and here I'll just type section. Now this will select all the sections that we have in our HTML and store it inside this section's constant. Now we need to loop through all these sections, and we need to observe each of them. So let's type sections, and we'll use a for each loop. So let's type dot for each. Now for the single section, I'll just call it section, and let's create an arrow function. Now here you need to type observer dot observe, and here we need to pass these sections. So we have this variable called section over here, so let's pass that over here. Now what this will do is it will loop through all the sections and observe each of the sections. Right now let's continue with our add active class function. Now the first thing we will do is we will loop through all the entries, because this is basically an array. So let's type entries, and we will use for each to loop, and for each of the single entries I'll just call it entry. Right now let's create an arrow function. Now here we need to check whether the entry is in the viewport. So we can use an if condition for that. So let's tap if, and here I'll just tap entry, and here we need to type dot is intersecting. Now if any of the entry or any of the sections are in the viewport, this if condition will be true. So the first thing we will do is we'll just console.log it so that we can see that everything is working alright. So I'll just tap entry. Right now let's go back to our design and let's open the console. I'll just right click over here and click on inspect, and let's open the console. And here we can see we have these two entries, and if we open one of these, we have a target, and the target is basically the section. And if you open the second entry, and if you go to target, we have the services section. Now what we will do is we'll directly display this target. So let's go back, and here I'll just tap entry.target. Now we can see we have the about section and services section, and if you scroll down, we can see whenever the downloads section is visible on the screen, we have the downloads section displayed over here. So if you scroll up and if you scroll down, we can see that downloads is displayed over here, and if you scroll down even more, now we can see testimonials is displayed over here. So in this way we can detect which of these sections are displayed on the screen. Right, let's refresh this, and if we scroll down a little bit, we can see that as soon as at least 1 pixel of the download section is visible on the screen, we have it detected over here. But we want to have a little bit of threshold. So what we can do is we can add options for that. So let's go back, and here in the options, let's create a threshold. So let's tap threshold, and we'll just set it to 0.8. You can experiment with these values and come up with your own number. This number works fine for our design. So let's go back. Now we can see services is displayed over here, and if we scroll down, and here at the bottom we can see that the download section is visible, but it is not detected over here. So if we scroll up and scroll up even more, and now we can see that the download section is detected. And now if we scroll up, and now we can see that the services section is detected. Let's scroll down, and here we can see the testimonial section, but it is not being detected over here. So let's scroll up a little bit, and now we can see that the testimonial section is displayed over here. So now threshold is working alright. Now the last thing we need to do is we need to add the active class to the current section. So for that, let's go back, and we'll just remove this console.log from here, and let's write the code to add the active class. Now what we're going to do is we're going to get the ID of the section. So here we can see for each of the sections we have the IDs. We have about, services, downloads, and testimonials. And if we scroll up for the anchor tags, we have this href with the same ID. So we can select these anchor tags based on the IDs. So what we're going to do is, if you go back over here, and if I just bring back the console.log, and if I just type target.id, and if I open the console once again, here we can see that the ID is displayed over here. So what we can do is we can select the anchor tags with the href of this ID so that we can add the active class to that. So let's go back, and what we're going to do is we're going to create a variable. So let's create a variable called current dot equals, and here let's type document.querySelector. And now we need to select the anchor tag with the href which has the ID of the entry that is intersecting. So I'll just add it inside backticks because we need to add a variable as well. So if you go back to the HTML file, here we can see we have this division with the class of scroll indicator. So let's type dot scroll indicator, and in that we have the anchor tag, and we need to select it based on the href. So for that you need to type square brackets, and in that you have to type href equals, and if you go back to the HTML file, here we can see we have this hash before the ID name. So let's go back, and here we will add the hash, and after that we need to add the ID of the entry. So I'll just type $, curly braces, and here let's type entry.target.id. Right now this will give us the active dot. Now we need to add the active class to that. So let's type current dot ClassList.add active. Right now let's go back to our design, and if you scroll down, we can see we have the services.active over here, and if you scroll down even more, now we can see that the downloads dot is active, and if you scroll down even more, we have the testimonials dot active, Now when we have one of these dots active, we need to have all the other dots inactive. So we need to remove the active class from all the other dots. So let's go back and let's create a function for that. Let's create a function called remove active class. And first of all, I'll just select all the dots. So let's type const dots equals document.querySelector all. And the dots are basically anchor tags. So let's type dot scroll indicator A. Right now let's loop through all the dots. So let's type dots dot for each. And for each of the dots, I'll just call it dot. And here we just need to type dot class list dot remove active. And here in the add active class function, we need to call the remove active class function. So let's type remove active class. So now it will first of all remove all the active classes and then add the active class to the current dot. So let's go back and now let's test it out. Let's scroll down and now we can see that the services dot is active. Let's scroll down even more. Now we have the downloads dot active and now we have the testimonials dot active. And we can click on any of these dots and we have the correct dot active. So everything is working alright. So that's basically how you can create a scroll spy indicator using HTML, CSS and JavaScript. Right, here is our source code and let's go to the style.css file and let's add a media query. So let's type @media and let's set the max width to, let's try 600 pixels. So now if the screen width is less than 600 pixels, all the CSS that we have inside this block will be added to our design. So let's select this scroll indicator division. So here let's type dot scroll indicator. And what we will do is we will bring this scroll indicator to the right side. So let's set the right position to 20 pixels. And let's also add a background. So let's type background and let's set it to white. And we'll also add a box shadow. And let's set the box shadow to 0, 4 pixels, 40 pixels, -8 pixels, RGBA, 0, 0, 0 and 0.3. And let's also add some padding. So let's type padding and let's set the padding to 24 pixels top and bottom and 6 pixels left and right. And we'll also have rounded corners. So let's type border radius and let's set it to 20 pixels. Now what we're going to do is we're going to bring this scroll indicator to the right side of the screen by default. And we will add an arrow. And when we click on the arrow, we want to display it in this position right here. So by default, it will be on the right side. So for that, let's type transform and translate. And let's set it to 40 pixels in the x-axis, and for the y-axis we already have some values over here. So here we can see for the scroll indicator we have this translate y of -50%. So we have to maintain that value. So here I'll just type -50% for the y-axis. Right now we can see this is how it looks. Now we need to add an arrow. So for that we're going to use icons from heroicons.com. So here I'm in heroicons.com and let's search for arrow. And let's search for an icon. I'll just add this icon. So let's click on copy SVG. And let's go back to our HTML file. And here in the scroll indicator, I'll just create a division. Let's give it a class of arrow. And here I'll just paste the SVG. Right now let's go to our CSS file and let's style the arrow. So let's type scroll indicator arrow. Now first of all, let's set a width of 20 pixels and we will position this arrow relative to the scroll indicator. So let's type position absolute and let's set the left position to -20 pixels and let's set the top position to 50%. Right now let's add a background color and let's set it to 222 and we'll set the color of the icon to white and let's set a padding of 4 pixels top and bottom and 0 for left and right. And right now the icon is not exactly in the center, so we have to type display of flex. Now it is exactly in the center. Now let's add rounded corners to the top left and bottom left. So let's type border radius and let's set it to 8 pixels, 0, 0 and 8 pixels. And right now the icon is not exactly in the center vertically, so here we have to type transform translate y negative 50%. Now it is exactly in the center. Let's also set the cursor to pointer. So when we hover over this, we have this pointer. Now the next thing we need to do is when we click on this arrow, we need to bring this scroll indicator to the left side. So for that, we're going to add an active class to the scroll indicator. So here let's type scroll indicator dot active, and here let's type transform, translate, and let's set it to negative 50% and negative 50%. And we'll also add smooth transition. So here I'll just type transition, all 400 milliseconds is. Now if we increase the width of this browser window, here we can see that the arrow is displayed over here. So we need to hide this arrow when we are on larger screens. So here let's type scroll indicator arrow, and let's set the display to none. And now if we increase the width of the screen, we can see that the arrow is not being displayed. It is only displayed in smaller screens. Right now the last thing we need to do is we need to display the scroll indicator when we click on this arrow. So for that, let's go to the main.js file, and first of all let's reference the scroll indicator and the arrow. So let's type const scroll indicator equals document.querySelector scroll indicator, and we also need to select the arrow. So let's type const scroll arrow, or let's name it scroll indicator arrow equals document.querySelector scroll indicator arrow. Right now let's add an event listener to the scroll indicator arrow. So let's type scroll indicator arrow dot add event listener, and let's listen for the click event, and let's create an arrow function. And now the only thing we need to do is add the active class to the scroll indicator. So let's type scroll indicator dot class list dot add active, and now let's see whether it works. So let's click on this arrow, and we can see that the scroll indicator is being displayed, and I think we can move it a little bit to the right. So here let's change this value to, let's try 8 pixels, and I think that looks alright. So let's click on this arrow, and we can see that the scroll indicator is being displayed. Now when we click on this arrow once again, the scroll indicator should go back. So for that, let's go back to our main.js file, and here instead of add, we need to type toggle. Right now let's test it out. So let's click on this arrow, and we have the scroll indicator displayed, and if I click on this arrow once again, it disappears. So everything is working alright. Let's also click on one of these dots, and everything is working alright. So this is the mobile version, and this is the desktop version. So that's basically it with the responsive version of our scroll spy indicator. Right here I'm in the dashboard of my Blogger website, and this is how it looks right now. We have added a theme which comes by default called Contempolite. So now let's go ahead and add this design to our Blogger website. So the first thing you have to do is click on this arrow and click on Edit HTML. And here we need to add the HTML, CSS and JavaScript. Right now in our website we have just one section which contains all the blog posts. So we will add some of these sections from here into our website so that we can make these dots work. And then in the end we will have this post section as the last section. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go to our source code. And the first thing we will do is we will copy the HTML. So let's copy from this line of code till this line right here. Now you can easily go ahead and change the content of these sections over here. So instead of services, you can just add any HTML you want. And then here we have these dots. So you can also change the text that displays on the dots. And you can also add and remove any of these dots and also the corresponding sections. Right now let's copy this from here, and let's go back to our theme code. And we will paste it just below the header. So this is the header, and then we have this post section. So we will add all these sections just between these two sections. So if you right click over here and click on inspect, and if you take a look at the structure of the website, here we can see we have this header, and after the header we have this division, and after the division we have another division which contains all the content of the post section. So we will add our sections just below the header. So let's go back to our theme code and let's search for the ending tag of header. So I'll just press Command F and let's search for less than / header. So this is the ending tag of the header. So let's make some space over here and let's paste the HTML right here. Right, we have pasted the HTML. Now here we can see we have these 4 sections, and we also want to add this section which has the post along with these sections. Because if you go to the JavaScript of our code, here we can see that we are selecting all the sections in our website. So what we will do is we'll create a container division. So here I'll just create a division and let's give it a class of my sections. And what we will do is we will end this my sections division after this division right here, which contains all the posts. So I'll just delete this space from here and let's create a section to contain this division so that we have the correct structure for our website. So let's type section and let's give it an ID of posts, and we will close this section after this division. So I just click on this button to fold the code, and here we can see this is where the division ends. So after this I'll just close this section, and I'll also close this container division which has the class of my sections. So let's type less than / div. Now if we save this and if we go back to our website, now if we take a look at the structure of our website, so if I right click over here and go to inspect, now here we can see we have this division with the class of my sections, and in that we have these sections that we just added, and then lastly we have this post section, and in that we have the division which contains all the posts. So this is how our structure looks right now. Now we can select all these sections inside the my sections division. So let's go back and first of all let's add the CSS. So let's go back to our source code and let's go to the style.css file and let's copy all the CSS from this line of code till the end, and let's copy and paste it over here inside our theme code. So let's scroll up and go to the CSS of the theme, and here we can see this is all the CSS. So let's go to the end of the CSS, and here let's make some space and I'll just paste the CSS over here. Right now the next thing we will do is we will add the JavaScript. So let's go to the end of our theme code, and here just before the body ends I'll just add the JavaScript. So let's create a script tag over here, and let's go back to our source code and let's go to the main.js file and let's copy all this JavaScript from here and let's paste it over here. And here we can see in this line of code we are selecting all the sections. So here I'll just add .my sections, and it will select all the sections inside the my sections division, because our theme may have other sections as well. So we don't want to select any of those sections, we just want to select the sections that we just added. Right now let's save this and let's see how it looks. And now let's go back to our website and let's refresh this page. And here we can see all the sections are displayed, and we also have the dots displayed over here. But the text is displayed one below the other, so we need to fix that. Let's scroll down, and here we have the testimonial section, and if you scroll down, now here we can see there are some problems in the styling of some of the elements in this section. And if you go back to our CSS in the theme code, let's scroll up. And here we can see that we have set the font size to 40 pixels for all the content inside the section. So that's the reason why we have this large font size over here. So what we will do is we will add a specific class to all the sections that we have on the top. And for this section we will have another class so that we can style them differently. So let's go back and let's go to the HTML. And here for these sections let's also add a class. So let's type class and let's give it a class of custom section. And let's copy this class from here and we'll just paste it inside all the other sections. And then in the end we have this section right here, but it contains all the blog posts, so we don't want to have these styles applied to this section. So that's why we want to add the class over here. But for this we will add a different class. So let's type class and let's give it a class of blogger section. so that we can style this differently if we want. And if we go back to our website, here we can see that there are just 4 dots, but we have 5 sections in our website, including this last section, which is the list of posts. So for that, we have to go back to our code and we have to add that dot. So here we already added this section with an ID of posts. So here for the dots, let's add one more anchor tag. So I'll just copy this and I'll just paste it down here. And here, instead of testimonials, let's type posts. And here for the href, let's type hash posts, which is the ID. Right now, let's use this custom section class in our CSS. So let's scroll up. So here, instead of section, I'll just type dot custom section. Now it will select the correct section. So here also we need to type dot custom section. And here also we need to type dot custom section. And if you go back to our website, here we can see that all the content of the text is displayed one below the other. So we need to fix that as well. So let's right click over here and click on inspect. And let's see what's the problem. And here on the right side, let's see whether we have any CSS property added by the theme. So let's scroll down. And here we can see we have word break and it is set to break word. So we have to change this to normal. Now if you hover over this, we can see that it looks alright. So we have to set the break word to normal. So let's go back to our CSS. And here in the scroll indicator, let's type word break and let's set it to normal. And we'll also add a z index so that it is on top of all the other elements. So let's type z index and let's set it to a high number. So I'll just type 900 and let's save it. And now let's go back to our website and let's refresh this page. Now we can see that the styling is correct over here. And on the right side, we can see there are 5 dots. We also have posts over here and everything is working all right. Now there is one bug we need to fix. So if we scroll down, here we can see for the posts section, we don't have this dot active. Whenever the post section is displayed on the screen, we need to have this red background color for this dot, but it is not happening over here. It is happening for all the other sections. Now the reason for that is that if you go back to the JavaScript, here we can see that we have added options to our intersection observer, which we are using for detecting the elements when they appear on the screen. So here we can see we have added a threshold of 0.8. Now this simply means that whenever 80% of the element is displayed inside the viewport, we want to detect it. Now for all the other sections, it is working alright because here we can see now 80% of the section is being displayed. If you scroll down, so the second dot is active. Now if you scroll down for the post section, we have a lot of height for this post section, so it is not possible for 80% of this section to be displayed on the screen. So what we can do is we can simply decrease the height of the section, the outer wrapper. So if we go to the structure of the website, here we can see that we have this section which we have created, and in that we have this division. So we can simply go ahead and decrease the height of this section to be the same as all the other sections, and it will not affect anything else in our website. So let's go back and let's go to the CSS, and here let's select the blogger section. So here we can see we have this section with the class of blogger section. So let's select this section. Here I'll just type blogger section and let's set the height to 70 viewport height, just like all the other sections, and let's save it. And now let's go back to our website and let's refresh this page. And now we can see that this dot is active, so everything is working alright. And let's also take a look at the mobile version. And this is the mobile version, and everything is working alright. Let's select one of these sections and we are taken to that section. So that's basically how you can add a scroll spy indicator to your Blogger website. Alright, so that's it for this video. I will leave the link of the source code in the description, and if you have any doubts, you can ask in the comments below. And if you like this video, please click on the like button and subscribe to this channel to get the latest video updates. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a nice day.